Hello, fellow birders. My name is Denis Kania. Today we're going to be taking a look at the grebes that can show up in DuPage County, particularly in fall plumage. On the DuPage Birding Club Education channel, we'll be discussing all things bird related. And as I mentioned, today we'll be looking at the grebes that do show up in DuPage County, particularly in fall plumage. So here are 4 grebes that you can find in DuPage County: Pied-billed Grebe, red-necked Grebe, Horned Grebe, and Eared Grebe. And if we were to see them in these plumages, we really wouldn't have much difficulty in separating them. But it gets a little trickier in the fall. So here are records from Fermilab for the past 33 years that reflect the occurrences of all 4 of the grebes. You can see Pied-billed Grebe can potentially be with us all year round, but for the most part, we expect to see them showing up in the second half of February, all through the breeding season, and usually they are gone by November. But we do have them showing up regularly on Christmas counts and throughout the rest of December, and even sometimes in January. You can see that the other grebes, horned, red-necked, and eared, all show up as migrants. And the most abundant one would be the horned grebe. And we can see that they generally are appearing beginning of March in the spring, all through April. And then in the fall, we have lesser number of records, but they are more or less in late October and into November. And the other 2 species, red-necked and eared, we have some records for them, but you can see they are quite sporadic. And red-necked grebe probably is the most frequently found at Fermilab, if it's going to be found at all in the county. There are a few records outside of Fermilab, but for the most part, they seem to show up at Fermilab. So very sporadic. Probably the least likely to be seen would be the red-necked grebe. And eared grebe is a little more frequent and does show up in the same windows as horned grebe, so that leads to some issues because those 2 do look very similar. So let's start out with our most common grebe, which would be the pied-billed grebe. And in the fall, you're going to see that it still has the same basic structure. It does have this rounded head. It has this dagger-like bill that is very short. And in breeding plumage, you'd see a well-defined black band near the tip of the bill. And you can see that's almost non-existent here. And in some instances, you won't see any black on the bill at all. The juvenile, it still has pretty much the same structure as the adult. You'll see all these little white markings in the head. It's kind of an unusual patterning, but you'll see that on juveniles. You'll see that on juveniles of many different grebes. However, the only one that's going to show up most likely in our county with that kind of appearance would be the pied-billed grebe. The others, such as eared grebe or horned grebe, I wouldn't expect to see them showing up with any kind of juvenile plumage. Another point of features or structure about this species is that it does have a short, rather chunky looking neck. Overall, it's kind of a squat little bird. On the other end of the spectrum, the grebe that we're least likely to see would be the red-necked grebe. And it's quite different. It still does have a heavy neck, but it's a longer neck. It still has somewhat of a rounded head. But look at the bill. The bill is very long compared to the pied-billed grebe. In fact, it's the longest bill on any of the grebes that we're going to talk about. And it's a pale bill. Even at distance, it should show up as pale. And you can see that the length of the bill from the base out to the tip and then the base back to the back of the head is pretty much equal distant. So it's a rather large looking bill. You'll see that the throat is rather dark on the front, and that would eliminate horned grebe, but it would not eliminate eared grebe. And at close observation, you'd be able to see that it does have a dark eye, which would set it apart from the other 2 grebes we're going to talk about. But again, this bird is not very likely in the county. So here's one of the birds that we would expect to see more frequently in the county. In fact, of the 2 remaining to be discussed, the horned grebe is much more frequently seen. So in fall plumage, you're going to see that the throat area is pretty pale. There might be just a little bit of gray here on the upper part of the neck, and that would be the only area where you'd see any dark. Any dark would be on the back of the neck. You can see that in this individual as well. It has a short bill compared to what we just looked at on the red-necked grebe. You can see it's shorter from the base of the bill out to the tip than it is from the base of the bill to the back of the head. In fact, it almost looks like it's only about half as long. It's a straight bill. It's a little heavier than what we will expect to see on an eared grebe, and it does have a pale tip, pale colored tip. You would expect to see more white in the face or this particular area here behind the eye than you would see on a eared grebe. Much more extensive in both cases here. And again, that whitish throat. If we are looking for the high point on the head, typically on horned grebes, it's going to be behind the eye. You kind of see it here, you can see it here. When we look at eared grebe, you'll see that that high point is further forward on the head. And here is that eared grebe. You can see that the throat is much darker than what we were just looking at on the horned grebe. You can see there's much less white in the head, and most of that white will be confined to the back of the head, as you can see here and here. Of course, there's a little bit of white on the throat as well. The bill structure is a little bit different. You can see it's thinner than what we just saw on that horned grebe, and it does appear to have a slight upturn to it as well. And the tip of the bill will be dark, unlike the horned grebe. And again, if we look at the high points, you can see it's here above the eye. This is a little harder to determine, but we would expect it to be above the eye, or certainly forward of what we expect on the horned grebe. Again, in good light, we can get a good look at the eye. You'll see that eared grebe will have a reddish eye. And I'm not sure if I pointed that out on the horned grebe, but that would have a reddish eye as well. So things to keep in mind when you're studying grebes out in the field. Take a good look at that bill size and shape. That part is very important. We discussed the various differences. Pied-billed having that very short dagger-like bill, redneck grebe having that long bill, and then the horned and eared having short bills that are rather thin. The horned grebe having the heavier bill between the two, and eared grebe tends to have a little bit of an upturn to its bill. Horned grebe will have that pale tip to it on the bill. Look for contrast in light and dark on the neck as well as in the face, and pay careful attention to where those light areas are. The size can be misleading on all of these birds when they're out on the pond. So try to take advantage of any other waterfowl that might also be on the pond so that you can hopefully calibrate size pretty much. All of these are going to appear to be small birds. The redneck grebe is going to be the largest, and the pied-billed grebe will probably be the smallest, but none of them will look very big. So thanks for taking the time to view this video. Hopefully we've given you some bird food for thought. And I hope you'll join us again in the future as we explore all things bird related.